Imagine buying a $500,000 tractor and not being allowed to fix it when it breaks. That's the reality for thousands of American farmers who own John Deere equipment. Locked out by software they don't control, repairs they can't make, crops rotting in fields while they wait for a company technician to show up at hundreds of dollars an hour. This isn't just about tractors. It's about control. And what happens when a legendary American brand becomes the gatekeeper of the land it was built to serve. When a modern John Deere tractor rolls off the assembly line, it's no longer just a piece of machinery. It's a rolling server, a high-tech fortress wrapped in green and yellow. For farmers, that used to be a symbol of trust, strength, and reliability. But now, that same tractor has become a source of frustration and even fear. Underneath the hood of every new John Deere is a labyrinth of proprietary code, electronic control units, and digital rights management software that makes the machine nearly impossible to repair without corporate permission. Imagine this. It's harvest time. The weather is unpredictable. Every hour counts, and your $250,000 combine suddenly throws a software error. It won't start. It won't move. It won't do anything until a certified John Deere technician shows up, and they're booked solid for the next 5 days. You know what the issue is. You know how to fix it, but you can't. Not because you don't have the tools. Not because you don't have the skill, but because John Deere won't let you. That's the chilling reality thousands of farmers across America are facing, locked out of equipment they legally own. Through a complex web of digital locks, licensing agreements, and federal copyright law, John Deere has created what critics call a walled garden of repair, where only authorized dealers can diagnose, access, and fix certain software-related issues. Even basic fixes like recalibrating sensors or clearing error codes can require proprietary software tools that independent repair shops of farmers are forbidden from using. And it's not just inconvenient, it's economically devastating. Every hour a tractor is out of commission during planting or harvesting can cost a farm thousands of dollars. Some estimates place that figure even higher when dealing with specialty crops or extreme weather windows. But even more devastating is the loss of control. Generations of farmers raised on fixing their own gear in barns and garages now find themselves helpless, staring at a computer screen they're not allowed to touch. The justification from Deere? Safety and reliability. The company argues that the software is deeply integrated into the hardware, and unauthorized changes could damage the equipment or void emissions compliance. But critics, including farmers, right-to-repair advocates, and even lawmakers, see this as a smokescreen. They argue that Deere's system isn't about protecting the customer, it's about protecting revenue. Deere makes money every time a farmer is forced to call in a technician. They make money when parts are locked behind software. They make money when farmers have no choice but to upgrade, because repairing old equipment becomes cost-prohibitive. And all of this operates under the legal cover of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA, a law originally intended to prevent piracy, now being weaponized to prevent basic repair. In effect, the company has created digital handcuffs, invisible, unbreakable, and legal, that bind farmers to its authorized network. These restrictions have given Deere enormous leverage over rural America. It's estimated that over 50% of all large-scale farming equipment in the U.S. is Deere-branded. When that many farmers depend on one company, and that company controls both the product and the repair ecosystem, you're not dealing with just a manufacturer anymore. You're dealing with a monopoly. And the resistance is growing. Across the country, frustrated farmers are banding together in Facebook groups, Reddit threads, and underground repair networks, sharing cracked software and workaround solutions. These tractor hackers are fighting back in the only way they can, by reclaiming their right to maintain and repair the very tools that put food on America's tables. But the risks are high. Some of these acts fall into legally gray territory. In some cases, simply modifying your own equipment software could be considered a federal offense under current interpretations of the DMCA. Still, many farmers say they have no choice. When it's a question of feeding your family or watching your crop rot while waiting for a technician, the law becomes less important than survival. Meanwhile, the battle has reached state legislatures and even Congress. The right-to-repair movement has gained significant traction, with dozens of states introducing bills that would force companies like John Deere to make parts, tools, and software available to independent shops and owners. In 2022, under pressure from the public and political scrutiny, John Deere signed a memorandum of understanding with the American Farm Bureau promising to expand access to repair tools, But critics argue it was more of a PR move than a meaningful change. Many farmers report that nothing has improved, and the gates are still locked. As we stand today in 2025, the fight is far from over. The question isn't just whether farmers can repair their tractors, it's whether they truly own them at all. When a machine becomes a subscription, when repairs become a service contract, when software controls the soil, the very foundation of agriculture shifts. And unless these digital handcuffs are broken, the next generation of farmers may not inherit the freedom of the land, but a lifetime of dependence on the companies that claim to serve them. And that's where the story gets darker. Because once you start pulling at the threads of John Deere's repair restrictions, you realize this isn't just about tractors or farming. It's about a total shift in power, a quiet, calculated move by one of America's most trusted brands to transform itself from a machinery company into a tech monopoly. For nearly 2 centuries, John Deere was known for building plows, tractors, and equipment tough enough to work the unforgiving soil of the American heartland. But in the last decade, the company has undergone a silent metamorphosis. No longer just an iron and steel manufacturer, John Deere has rebranded itself as an agricultural technology company. At the center of this transformation is something most farmers never signed up for: data. Modern Deere equipment doesn't just plow and harvest. It collects massive amounts of real-time data about soil composition, crop yield, equipment usage, fuel efficiency, GPS locations, and more. Every minute a tractor runs, it's generating a digital footprint. That information doesn't belong to the farmer. It belongs to Deere. Through cloud-based systems like John Deere's Operations Center, this data is uploaded, stored, and analyzed by the company, and then monetized in ways many farmers don't even fully understand. Here's where things get unsettling. Not only is John Deere locking farmers out of their machines, but they're also quietly building a data empire behind the scenes. That information, collected from millions of acres of farmland, is incredibly valuable. It can inform seed companies, fertilizer manufacturers, crop insurers, even hedge funds looking to bet on commodity prices. In essence, John Deere now knows more about America's farmland than the farmers who work it. And that's no accident. This digital land grab is part of a much larger agenda: vertical control of the agricultural ecosystem. By owning the equipment, the software, and the data, Deere is positioning itself as the indispensable middleman in every stage of farming: planting, growing, harvesting, and selling. They're not just selling tractors anymore. They're selling access. Access to tools, access to diagnostics, access to insights, and in some cases, access to your own land's data. It's a strategy ripped straight from the Silicon Valley playbook. Like Apple's closed ecosystem or Amazon's control over its marketplace, Deere is using the convenience of integration to build dependency. Want to analyze your crop yields? Use Deere's cloud. Want to run diagnostics? Use Deere's licensed software. Want to fix your tractor? Call Deere. The walls of the garden are getting taller, and farmers are the ones trapped inside. The irony is almost poetic. The very company that helped mechanize American independence on the farm is now accused of engineering digital dependence. And this isn't a hypothetical future. It's already happening. Reports have emerged of farmers having their equipment remotely disabled or bricked because they attempted unauthorized repairs. Others have found themselves locked out of critical software features after missing service payments or violating terms of use buried in user agreements. Think about that. A machine sitting on your land, fully functional, until the software decides otherwise. And remember, this isn't just happening to big industrial farms with IT departments. It's hitting family farms, the backbone of rural America, where a broken machine isn't just an inconvenience. It's a crisis. Where trust is still built on handshakes and the idea that if you bought it, you own it. But now, John Deere is acting less like a farming partner and more like a tech overlord, dictating terms through software and licensing. And while the green paint and legacy branding may still evoke a sense of pride, what's under the hood is beginning to look more like Silicon Valley than small-town Iowa. The question many farmers are starting to ask is simple but chilling. If John Deere owns the software, do I still own the tractor? And if the answer is no, then what else don't they own anymore? The implications stretch far beyond the fields. Because if John Deere succeeds in this transformation, if they can convince an entire industry to accept a future where access is rented and ownership is an illusion, then other industries will follow. Construction, transportation, mining, all will look to Deere's model as proof that digital control equals profit. And so, the fight over repair rights, over access to data, over a farmer's ability to work their own land. This isn't just a footnote in the tech world. It's a battleground for the future of ownership in America. The tractors are just the beginning. For a long time, farmers were patient. They believed John Deere would come around, that the company, with its deep roots in rural America, would listen to reason. But patience turned to frustration, and frustration boiled over into action. The so-called right to repair movement wasn't born in Washington, D.C. or Silicon Valley. It was born in machine sheds, dusty barns, and the back corners of rural county fairgrounds, where fed-up farmers began organizing, not to protest with signs, but with screwdrivers, software cracks, and a defiant belief that what they owned should be theirs to fix. The breaking point came slowly and then all at once. After years of dealing with delays, repair bills, and helplessness, farmers began to realize that this wasn't a bug in the system. It was the system. That realization sparked a wave of underground resistance. In secret online forums, farmers began trading hacked versions of John Deere's diagnostic software. These tools, originally intended only for certified technicians, allowed users to bypass error codes, reset sensors, and even unlock certain restricted features on their equipment. Suddenly, a locked machine could be brought back to life without ever calling the dealership. It wasn't legal, but for many, it felt like justice. These farmers weren't criminals. They were problem solvers, mechanics, engineers, survivalists. And as the digital locks grew tighter, so did their resolve. Independent repair shops that had been edged out by Deere's exclusivity found new business helping farmers find these workarounds. Some began modifying older equipment, pre-software tractors, to keep them running longer, just to avoid being trapped by the newer tech. The value of 1980s and 1990s tractors, models without complicated ECUs or software, suddenly skyrocketed on the resale market. Why? Because they represented freedom. At the same time, the political side of the battle began to heat up. The right to repair movement gained traction in state houses across the country. In Nebraska, Colorado, Minnesota, and other agricultural states, legislation was introduced that would force companies like Deere to provide the necessary software, tools, and manuals to owners and independent shops. Deere fought back hard, spending millions on lobbying, arguing that unauthorized repairs would lead to safety issues, environmental violations, or intellectual property theft. But lawmakers started listening, not to the corporations, but to the farmers. In emotional testimony at state hearings, farmers spoke of being stranded in the middle of a harvest, unable to fix a simple issue. One man described driving 3 hours just to clear a code that should have taken 30 seconds. Another revealed he was considering quitting farming altogether, not because of the work, but because of the control being stripped from him by the very tools he used to survive. Their stories weren't just about machines. They were about independence, identity, and dignity. Eventually, the federal government took notice. In 2021, President Biden signed an executive order urging the Federal Trade Commission to crack down on repair restrictions. It was a start, but enforcement lagged and the machinery industry was slow to respond. In 2023, John Deere signed a voluntary agreement with the American Farm Bureau promising more access to tools and software. But in practice, many farmers said the access was limited, incomplete, or prohibitively expensive. The gates weren't open, they were just slightly ajar. So the resistance continued. Farmers launched lawsuits. Consumer advocacy groups joined forces. Tech activists began treating tractors like iPhones, tearing them down, mapping their circuits, reverse engineering their software. What began as a grassroots rebellion had become a full-blown movement, crossing boundaries between rural and urban, left and right. Because at its core, this wasn't just about tractors, it was about the right to fix anything you own. Phones, cars, laptops, tools, homes. And John Deere, once a proud symbol of agricultural ingenuity, now found itself in the role of the corporate villain, the Goliath in a digital David and Goliath war. Every locked tractor, every repair denied, became a rallying cry. Farmers weren't just customers anymore. They were activists, and they were fighting not only for their machines, but for their livelihoods and their legacy. Still, the outcome of the battle remains uncertain. Laws have been proposed, but not all have passed. Deere has made promises, but farmers are skeptical. And while some victories have been won, the core issue remains. In a world where software governs hardware, who really owns what you buy? As more farmers step forward, share their stories, and push for reform, one thing is becoming clear. This isn't going away. Not until ownership means real ownership again. Not until freedom to repair is not a loophole, but a right. Because the next time a machine fails and a storm is rolling in, no one should have to wait for permission to save their own farm. For many farmers, the revelation came too late. They had already sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars into John Deere's latest models, sleek, powerful machines marketed as the future of farming. What they hadn't realized was that they weren't just buying a tractor, they were buying a license to use one. It looked like ownership. It felt like ownership. But behind the glossy paint and the horsepower stats was a fine print fortress, one where the real control didn't belong to the farmer anymore. And that control, more and more, is digital. Today's John Deere tractors are more like mobile data centers than farming tools. They come equipped with dozens of electronic control units, ECUs, onboard computers, and advanced sensors connected to satellites, all feeding information back to centralized servers. The engine, hydraulics, GPS, steering, nearly every critical function relies on software to operate. And that software? It's locked down tighter than the Pentagon servers. Need to recalibrate a sensor? You'll need a Deere technician. Engine fault code won't clear? That's behind a digital paywall. Want to swap a fuel injector? Not unless the software authorizes it. Farmers report being completely shut out from performing even routine maintenance without the company's tools. Independent repair shops have been driven to the margins, forced to either turn away customers or operate in legal gray zones. One farmer described the frustration like this: "I know exactly what's wrong with my combine. I could fix it in 2 hours if Deere would just let me in. But instead, I'm watching $50,000 of corn rot in the field while I wait for their guy to drive out and press 3 buttons." That level of dependence doesn't just slow operations, it changes power dynamics. It creates corporate gatekeepers where none existed before. The kind of old-school, hands-on mechanical skill that once defined American farming is being digitally erased. You can't wrench your way out of software lock. You can't hotwire a tractor whose ignition system is tied to cloud-based authorization. And as more components become digitized, that mechanical autonomy slips further out of reach. This is where control becomes currency. By locking up repair, Deere has built a recurring revenue model. Want access to diagnostic tools? Pay for a subscription. Want advanced GPS functionality or variable rate planning? That's extra. In some cases, farmers have reported being sold the hardware with features disabled, only to be charged later to unlock them via software. The machine is already capable. The farmer has already paid. But access becomes a product in itself. And behind all of this lies the most valuable asset of all, data. Every time a farmer plants a field, harvests a crop, or drives a machine, they are generating data: soil conditions, seed spacing, yield rates, moisture levels, equipment performance. All of it flows into Deere's cloud. But here's the kicker: Deere owns it, not the farmer. And they're not just storing it, they're analyzing it, aggregating it, and selling insights to seed companies, chemical suppliers, and possibly even financial markets. This has massive implications. If John Deere controls the tools, the repairs, and the data, what part of farming is left under the farmer's control? Critics warn that this kind of centralized control sets a dangerous precedent. Imagine a future where seed recommendations are tied to specific machine models, where crop insurance rates are determined by data you can't even see, or where market access is contingent on remaining within an approved digital ecosystem. It's not just about repairs anymore. It's about the future of food sovereignty. Some farmers, realizing the scope of this system, are beginning to opt out. They're refurbishing older, pre-software tractors. They're turning to smaller manufacturers who offer open access models. They're investing in DIY tools, open-source firmware, and hacking collectives that challenge Deere's lockdown from the outside. But the cost of opting out is high, and many don't have the financial breathing room to make that leap. Deere, for its part, continues to maintain that these systems are about safety, emissions compliance, and product integrity. And while there is some truth to that, the scale and opacity of their control tells a more calculated story. One where convenience is a cover for profit and security is a shield against competition. This is no longer a fight about fixing machines. It's a fight about who controls the future of agriculture. Because when the crop in your field, the machine in your barn, and the data on your land are all governed by code you don't own and can't change, the farm stops being yours in the ways that matter most. And if that control isn't reclaimed, if the software keeps winning over the soil, then the image of the independent American farmer could become nothing more than a myth. A myth in green and yellow.